I discovered that my husband would disappear for 2 hours every night. Finally, one day I followed him into a mysterious pawn shop. He was holding my nightgown, saying, "Pawn 6 months of her life. Eva's health is good, it won't matter." Then he took out my lipstick and handed it over. "Just 3 days of youth, she won't notice." On the bronze scales of the pawnbroker, my time was sold by the pound. I rushed in to stop him, but he grabbed my waist and pressed me against the cold counter. He kissed my cheek soothingly and said, "Can you bear to see Amy coughing up blood? She became like that because of me." He gently crushed 3 of my fingers. I screamed in pain, almost fainting. Trading your little pain for a day without Amy's suffering is a good deal. The blood-red light from the bronze scales drowned out my screams. Until one day, he pawned our wedding ring, saying, "Use this ring she's worn for 10 years to exchange for 10 years of Amy's life." But the pawnbroker suddenly laughed. Large-scale pawning requires an exchange between both parties. He turned to me, "Now, what of his will you pawn?" Ding! This novel reminds you to click the subscribe button in the bottom right corner to read the complete novel. The excruciating pain of my shattered finger bones made my vision blur. The cold counter dug into my cheek, with Justin's hand still pressing down on the nape of my neck. The crisp sound from moments ago was like snapping a dry twig, but it was my fingers. There, it'll only hurt for a moment." His voice was as gentle as honey, just like the countless times he had comforted me over the past decade. "Amy can't wait much longer, her lungs are in agony." My tears flowed uncontrollably, mixing with cold sweat, creating a mess. I couldn't understand how the man who had made me soup just yesterday, who called me darling, could now coldly crush my fingers. All for that woman called Amy Winslow. A flash of blood on the bronze scales, and the pain from my broken finger seemed to be drawn away, becoming a cold item of trade. Mr. Brooks, the owner behind the counter, curved his lips into an eerie smile. Justin released me, even carefully helping me up, cradling my trembling, now deformed hand. He lowered his head, gently blowing on it, as if this could dispel the pain. "See, it won't hurt for long," his tone carried a spine-chilling tenderness. "My brave Eva, this small price, in exchange for Amy not coughing blood for a day. It's worth it, isn't it?" Trading 3 of my fingers for another woman's comfort for a day, he said it was worth it. Looking at his handsome face so close to mine, I felt a nauseating churn in my stomach. I wanted to scream, to tear apart that hypocritical face. But my throat felt blocked, leaving only broken whimpers. He took off his coat, wrapping it around me, his movements as gentle as if handling a fragile treasure. Then he lifted me in one swift motion, walking out of this bizarre pawn shop. "Let's go home." Home, once a place full of warmth, now felt like an ornate cage. In the car, I curled up in the passenger seat, shaking all over from the pain. My right hand swollen beyond recognition, waves of piercing pain coursing through. He drove with focus, his profile impossibly perfect. After a long while, he suddenly spoke, his voice calm and steady. "Don't hate me, Eva. Amy, she can't die. She ended up like this because she saved me." He paused, as if explaining, or perhaps convincing himself. "You have to understand, I just want her to live." I turned abruptly, looking at him in disbelief. "Just because she saved you, you're willing to trade my life for hers? I'm your wife, we've been together for 10 years. These words stuck in my throat, too bitter to utter a sound. My heart felt as if gripped by an icy hand, painful and suffocating. He freed one hand, stroking my hair, like soothing a disobedient pet. "You're just giving up a little time, a little health. You won't die, Eva." He even smiled, though his eyes were frighteningly cold. "But if you don't behave, Amy might be gone tomorrow. Could you bear that?" He placed the hat of kindness on my head, using my suffering to fulfill his devotion. I closed my eyes, tears rolling down. Not from the excruciating pain in my fingers, but because the place in my heart that once belonged to him was shattering piece by piece. The car stopped. We were home. He carried me out of the car, all the way to the bedroom, laying me on the bed. Then he found the first aid kit, patiently cleaning my wound, applying medicine, and bandaging. I watched his lowered brows, long eyelashes casting shadows. Once, how I adored this gentleness of his. Now, I only felt a bone-deep chill. After bandaging, he leaned down, pressing a kiss to my forehead. Rest well, don't wander off, don't make me worry, okay? His tone was gentle, yet carried an undeniable control. He took my phone, putting it in his own pocket. I'll keep this for you for now. The door closed softly, the sound of the lock clicking into place. I was locked in, like a prisoner. Outside, the sky was brightening. I curled up on the bed, cradling my injured hand. The physical pain not even a fraction of the agony in my heart. I don't know how long it was before I heard his hushed, urgent voice outside the door. Amy, don't be afraid, the medicine, we'll have enough soon. I won't let anything happen to you. Medicine. So the years of my life he had pawned away. My health, even my pain, were just ingredients for medicine to save that woman, in his words. Tears completely blurred my vision. 10 years of marriage, apparently worth less than someone else's life-saving grace. My heart felt so swollen with pain it might burst. At that moment, hatred mixed with remnants of love, growing wildly like poisonous vines, entangling me until I could hardly breathe. I lay on the cold bed, my right hand throbbing with excruciating pain. Justin had bandaged it carefully, the gauze pristine white. But beneath it were 3 broken fingers. Sunlight streamed in, yet I felt cold. My body was drained of energy, and my head spun terribly. It felt as if something had been ripped away, leaving me hollow inside. This was only the beginning. Justin came in again, carrying a bowl of porridge. He sat down, scooped up a spoonful, blew on it to cool it, and brought it to my lips. His eyes were gentle as he said, "Eat something, Eva. You need to keep your strength up." I turned my head away, my stomach knotted, unable to eat anything. He sighed, set down the bowl, and reached into his pocket. He pulled out my favorite wooden comb. Its teeth still tangled with a few strands of my long hair. "Look at this," he said, caressing the comb as if admiring a treasure. "Mr. Brooks says this can buy Amy 3 nights of peaceful sleep." My eyes widened in shock, and I tried to snatch it back. It was a gift from my mother. But as soon as I moved, he easily restrained me, gripping my wrist so tightly it made me wince. "Don't fuss," he said, his tone a bit firmer but still gentle, carrying an undeniable pressure. "It's just 3 nights of peaceful sleep. You won't die from missing 3 nights, but she can't manage without it." I stared at him, my lips trembling, unable to utter a word. How could he say such things so matter-of-factly? "Justin, I'm your wife." I finally squeezed out, my voice choked with tears. He paused, then reached out to wipe away my tears, his fingertips ice-cold. "I know, that's why you need to help me," he said, looking at me with eyes as deep as a still pond. "You've always been so kind, Eva. Could you bear to see Amy suffer? She's in this state because she saved me." Again, those words, like a vice around my head. He left with the comb, locking the door behind him. I collapsed on the bed, tears seeping into my hair, leaving a cold, damp patch. After that day, my health deteriorated rapidly. I'd get dizzy spells and blackouts frequently. Mysterious purple bruises appeared on my body, painful to the touch. And sometimes even breathing was a struggle. Justin started coming back more often, each time taking away something old of mine, like a well-worn book or a necklace I often wore. With each item he took, I grew weaker. He always had a reason. He didn't bat an eye, as if he wasn't taking away my life, but merely inconsequential objects. I tried to resist once. I blocked the door, refusing to let him take anything. He easily pushed me aside. I fell to the floor, my forehead hitting the corner of the table, making me see stars. He crouched down to examine the wound on my forehead, frowning slightly. "Why are you so careless?" he scolded, as if it were all my fault. "Can't you just stay put? I've got enough on my plate with Amy's situation." I looked at him, feeling the last bit of life in my heart wither and die. Last night, I developed a low fever. Every bone in my body ached as I shivered under the blanket. He came in and felt my forehead, his expression complex for a moment before hardening with resolve. He took out his phone and showed me a video. In it, Amy lay in a hospital bed, her face pale, coughing violently with blood at the corners of her mouth. "Look," Justin's voice came from above me, filled with suppressed anguish. "Every time she coughs, it's like a knife in my heart, Eva. We have to save her." He tied my pain to his, turning our marriage into an altar. And I was the sacrifice. This morning, he brought me chicken soup and forced me to drink it all. "You need to build up your strength," he said, wiping the oil from the corner of my mouth with a gentleness that bordered on cruelty. "So you can last longer and be of use to Amy." I looked at his face, so close to mine, and felt my stomach churn, nearly vomiting. In the afternoon, he received a phone call. His tone immediately became tense yet gentle. "Discharged tomorrow? Good, come home, it'll be easier for me to take care of you. Don't worry, everything's arranged." After hanging up, he turned to me, his tone brooking no argument. "Amy's being discharged tomorrow. She'll stay here." I stood frozen, my blood turning to ice. "This is our home," I said, my voice shaking. He came over and cupped my face, his thumbs caressing my cheeks. The gesture was gentle, but his eyes were hard. "Eva, be good," he said, staring into my eyes, emphasizing each word. "Don't cause trouble. Right now, staying quiet and out of the way is the most useful thing you can do." So that was the meaning of my existence, to be a living medicine for his true love. He took away my phone, cutting off all my contact with the outside world. The silence was terrifying. I could only hear the sound of my own heart breaking piece by piece. And the clear sound of the lock when he left. The next afternoon, I heard the lock turn. I leaned against the headboard, unresponsive, my heart feeling numb. Justin entered first, cradling someone in his arms. Wrapped tightly in a blanket with only a pale, fragile face visible. He moved with utmost care, as if holding a priceless treasure. His eyes filled with a tenderness and concern I hadn't seen in ages. He carried her straight into the guest room next to the master bedroom, his voice soft and gentle. "Amy, we're home. I'll be here for you every day from now on." My fingers still ached, a reminder of how absurd this all was. He didn't even glance at me. After settling Amy, Justin came out and entered our bedroom. He frowned at the untouched food on the table. "Why haven't you eaten?" His tone held a hint of impatience. "What if your health deteriorates?" I remained silent, just looking at him. He seemed uncomfortable under my gaze and softened his tone a bit. "Amy's health is fragile. She needs peace and quiet. Don't disturb her unless necessary." He paused, then added, "Let me know if you need anything." He turned and went back to the guest room, leaving the door slightly ajar. I could hear him coaxing her to take her medicine, asking if she was too cold or too warm. All that tenderness, once reserved only for me, now lavished upon another woman. And I, like a ghost, drifted in this prison I once called home. Occasionally, I'd encounter Amy in the hallway. She'd lean against the doorframe in her silk nightgown, looking frail. Seeing me, she'd nod slightly and call me Eva. Her eyes would flit over my bandaged hand, my pale face. Before settling on Justin, who'd rushed to her side. "Justin, I'm feeling a bit dizzy," she'd say with a pout. Justin would immediately rush over, supporting her, his face full of concern. Then he'd throw an impatient glance at me, as if I were the cause of her discomfort. During meals, Justin would prepare a nourishing broth, its rich aroma filling the air. He'd carefully blow on each spoonful to cool it before feeding Amy. "Drink a bit more, it's good for you," he'd say, his gaze focused solely on her. I sat across the table, sipping bland porridge. Amy would take a few sips, then gently push the bowl away. Her brow furrowed as she breathed softly, "Justin, I can't drink anymore." "Just a little more, look how thin you've become," Justin would coax patiently. "I really can't." She'd start coughing lightly, her eyes reddening at the corners. Justin would immediately pat her back, his tone full of remorse. All right, no more. Don't choke." The bowl of broth, which I wasn't allowed to touch, would be carelessly set aside. I'd look down at my own bowl of watery porridge, suddenly feeling a lump in my throat. That night, my throat felt dry, and I coughed a few times. I'd probably caught a chill from all the recent stress. Justin pushed open the door, his face dark with displeasure. "Can't you be quieter?" he hissed, as if scolding a disobedient child. "Amy's just fallen asleep. She's a light sleeper, she can't bear any noise." I looked at him, suddenly lacking even the energy to argue. Was my heartbeat, my breathing, disturbing his precious Amy too? Seeing my expressionless face, he seemed to grow angrier. He tossed out, "Can't you be more considerate? She's so ill." The door slammed shut again. I sat in the darkness, unable to even shed a tear. So this is what it feels like when your heart dies completely. Not a searing pain, but utter desolation. That faint hope, the last remnant of our 10-year marriage, was finally crushed and scattered by his words. Perhaps it's for the best. I no longer hurt because of him. There was just a tiny bit of heartache left. Not for him, but for the me who had loved him unreservedly, foolishly, for 10 years. That version of me had died on the cold counter at the pawn shop. In his repeated, entitled demands. I listened to his gentle murmurs and her soft laughter drifting from the next room. I touched my still aching right hand. My nails dug silently into my palm. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. Justin was busy taking care of Amy, who couldn't stop coughing. When he went out to buy medicine, he forgot to lock the bedroom door. I gently pushed the door open, the hallway was empty. My heart beat heavily yet steadily in my chest. I wasn't afraid, just filled with a cold resolve. Barefoot, I slipped out of the house like a shadow. Relying on memory, I found that dark alley. The pawn shop was still there. The words Chronos Pawn on the lintel emitting a faint glow. I hid in the shadows by the door, holding my breath. He was indeed inside. Justin's back was familiar to me, yet now it seemed eerily foreign. He was carefully taking something out of his pocket, placing it on the cold bronze counter. Then, he made a gesture that froze my blood completely. He slipped off the wedding ring from his ring finger. The platinum band that matched mine, glinting coldly in the dim light. Without hesitation, he placed it on the counter. "This, in exchange for 10 years of her life," he said, his voice terrifyingly calm. I could almost hear the last piece of my heart shattering. Even our wedding ring could be pawned to extend her life. 10 years, our 10 years, in his eyes, could be exchanged so casually. Mr. Brooks picked up the ring, a faint hint of amusement seeming to cross his withered face. He didn't immediately place it on the bronze scales, but slowly turned his gaze towards the door, towards where I was hiding. Those eyes seemed able to pierce through all darkness. His pale lips curved into an eerie smile. Large-scale pawning requires an exchange between both parties. Justin whirled around, his face turning ghastly as he saw me. Mr. Brooks, however, no longer looked at him, but stared directly at me. His voice, hoarse yet clear, cut through the air. "Now, what of his will you pawn?" Mr. Brooks's words fell like a cold stone into still waters, creating the faintest ripple in my heart. Justin whirled around, his face turning ghastly as he saw me lurking in the shadows. He instinctively moved to approach me, but his steps faltered. As if the moment the ring left his hand, it had drained a part of his strength. "Eva! What are you?" His tone carried its usual reproach and a hint of barely concealed panic. Attempting to intimidate me with his presence. But I didn't look at him. My gaze passed over him, settling on Mr. Brooks's fathomless eyes. "Health," my voice was dry but remarkably steady, without a trace of tremor. "I want to pawn all of his health. Everything." The air froze. Justin looked as if he hadn't heard clearly. Or rather, couldn't believe what he'd heard. The anger on his face morphed into shock. "Eva Sutton. Do you have any idea what you're saying?" Mr. Brooks's gaunt face twisted into a deeper, eerie smile. He seemed utterly unsurprised. The bronze scales materialized silently, emitting a soft, otherworldly glow. He didn't ask for Justin's consent, as if my words alone were enough to seal the contract. From Justin's wrist, an invisible stream of light was extracted, merging into the bronze scales. The scale pan dipped slightly, emitting a dull hum. The transaction was complete. "No." Justin let out a low growl, lunging forward suddenly, only to stumble and brace himself against the cold counter with one hand. His complexion paled visibly. beads of cold sweat forming on his temples, his breathing becoming rapid. It was a sudden, hollowing weakness. He looked up at me, his eyes filled with disbelief and a sense of betrayal. You actually. I returned his gaze calmly, the barren wasteland in my heart unmoved by even the slightest ripple. I even found it a bit amusing. Had he ever thought of the word betrayal when he repeatedly took away my lifespan and health? It's just using your health to make your Amy feel a bit better. I repeated the words he had once said to me, my tone devoid of any emotion. Don't you want that? These words were like a blunt knife, stabbing deep into his most vulnerable spot at this moment. His pupils constricted, he opened his mouth, but was overcome by a violent coughing fit, doubling over, unable to utter another complete sentence. Mr. Brooks watched the scene with keen interest, as if enjoying a riveting drama. I didn't linger. I turned and pushed open the heavy wooden door, walking out into the cold night air. Behind me, Justin's muffled, painful coughs could be heard. But he was struggling even to stand upright, let alone chase after me. The night wind stung my face, biting cold. Yet it made me feel more lucid than ever before. Step by step, I walked home. My steps were heavy due to my still weakened body. But something within my heart was beginning to sprout. I unlocked the door with my key. Only a dim wall lamp illuminated the living room. Amy heard the noise and peeked out from the guest room. She wore a silk robe, her face still pale, but her eyes were clear, showing no signs of sleepiness. Seeing only me return, a flash of surprise and unease crossed her face. Eva? Why are you alone? Where's Justin? Her voice was soft, probing. I stopped and looked at her. Him? I repeated softly, my voice sounding a bit cold in the empty living room. He probably won't be back for a while. The fragile expression on Amy's face froze instantly, slowly fading away to reveal the true uncertainty beneath. She stared at me intently, as if trying to find answers in my face. I ignored her and walked straight to the bedroom that once belonged to Justin and me, now mine alone. I closed the door. The world fell silent. Leaning against the door, I raised my still bandaged and faintly aching right hand, slowly clenching it into a fist. Though still weak. But the air, it seemed, was finally a bit easier to breathe. After what seemed like an eternity, the sound of keys frantically fumbling with the lock echoed from outside. It took a while before the door was finally thrust open. Heavy, dragging footsteps followed, accompanied by labored, painful breathing that couldn't be suppressed. Justin had returned. He practically collapsed into the living room, his face as white as a sheet, lips blue, and forehead drenched in cold sweat. He looked as if he'd just been pulled from water, so weak that he had to lean against the wall to stay upright. He was a far cry from the well-dressed, domineering man who had left that morning. Amy was the first to rush over, exclaiming, "Justin! What's happened to you?" She tried to support him but stumbled under his weight. Her slender arms were no match for his bulk. Justin ignored her, his eyes fixed on the crack of the bedroom door I had just opened. I stood in the doorway, regarding him coldly. "Eva Sutton," he gasped, his voice hoarse and broken, yet still trying to muster his usual authority. What have you done to me?" I looked at him, barely able to stand, and felt nothing. "Nothing much," I said, my voice flat. "I've just traded your health so your dear Amy can have an easier time." I emphasized the words "your dear" ever so slightly. His pupils dilated sharply, as if my words had slapped him across the face. Intense anger made him want to lunge at me. But as soon as he took a step, his legs gave way, and he nearly fell to his knees, only just managing to grab the shoe rack beside him. He coughed violently, like a man with consumption. Amy was terrified. She clumsily patted his back while looking up at me. The feigned fragility in her eyes was gone, replaced by fear and hatred. "Eva! How could you do this to Justin? He did it all for..." I cut her off, shifting my gaze from Justin's pathetic form to her face. "For whom?" "For you?" Amy's words caught in her throat. Justin caught his breath, leaning against the shoe rack. His fingers shook as he pointed at me. "You vicious woman! Do you know?" "I know," I interrupted him again. walking towards him step by step, stopping in front of him, looking down at him as he was forced to tilt his head up slightly due to his weakness. I know what it feels like to have your health drained away. I know what it's like to cough up blood. I know what it's like to feel as helpless as an invalid. With each sentence, his face grew more ashen. Now, you know too. I looked down at him, a smile devoid of any warmth spreading across my face. How does it feel, Justin? Do you still think it's worth it, trading 10 years of her comfort for this? He glared at me, his chest heaving violently, too angry, or too weak, to speak. Amy whimpered beside him. Justin, don't get upset, sit down first. Eva, please, stop talking. I glanced at her. Don't worry, he won't die anytime soon. I survived having so much taken from me, didn't I? There's plenty left to use up slowly. Justin suddenly looked up, his eyes fixed on Amy with a complex expression. Amy's hand, which had been patting his back, hesitated almost imperceptibly. I turned away from their little drama, heading back to my room. Before closing the door, I left them with one last remark. Next time you want to pawn something, just ask me directly. Beg me, and perhaps I'll consider it. The door shut. It blocked out the suppressed coughing, the woman's soft crying, and all that nauseating hypocrisy. I walked to the window and pushed it open. Cold wind rushed in. In the garden below, new vines were quietly climbing up the dead branches. The tables have turned. Now it was Justin Hayes who was coughing his lungs out, and in need of someone to bring him tea and water. He lay in the guest room bed, but Amy Winslow complained that he was too noisy and disturbing her convalescence. So she pushed him out. He could only curl up on the sofa, wrapped in thick blankets. Still shivering from the cold, Amy came out less frequently now. Even when she did, she only looked at him from afar, her brow slightly furrowed, covering her mouth and nose with a silk handkerchief as if afraid of catching some germ. Her dizzy spells seemed to have lessened as well. When Justin called her, she always responded with a delay, and the water she brought was either too hot or too cold. Amy. Justin's voice was terribly hoarse, pleading. Could you fetch my medicine? Amy was checking her complexion in a small mirror, and upon hearing his request, she clicked her tongue impatiently. Just a moment, can't you see I'm busy? She dawdled for quite a while before bringing the medicine bottle over, her movements exaggerated and clearly showing her disgust. Justin watched her back, his gaze somewhat dazed. I sat at the dining table, leisurely eating a bowl of soup. My appetite seemingly improved a bit. Justin's gaze occasionally fell on me, complex and indecipherable. There was hatred, anger, and perhaps a hint of barely noticeable regret and pleading. I pretended not to notice. After finishing my soup, I stood up and grabbed my coat. Justin immediately became anxious, struggling to sit up. Where are you going? Amy also instantly raised her head from the mirror, eyeing me warily. I didn't answer, walking straight towards the door. Eva! Justin coughed out urgently, threatening. You're not allowed to go there again. I stopped in my tracks and turned to look at him. Afraid? Afraid I'll pawn more of your things? His face was deathly pale, his lips trembling, unable to speak. But Amy suddenly spoke up, her voice softening. Eva, Justin is just worried about you. That place is eerie, you shouldn't. I interrupted her, my gaze falling directly on Justin. I spoke slowly. Guess what I'm going to pawn this time? Your luck? Your career? Or? My gaze lightly swept over Amy, who instantly tensed up. Your earth-shattering love? Justin's eyes widened abruptly. Amy's face turned white in an instant, her fingers tightening around the mirror. I said nothing more and opened the door to leave. I walked step by step towards that familiar alley. In the pawn shop, Mr. Brooks seemed to know I would come. The bronze scales quietly emitted an eerie glow. He asked hoarsely, "What do you want to pawn this time?" I looked at those uncanny scales without immediately answering. His wealth? Career? Or his bond with that woman? Mr. Brooks prompted. I raised my eyes. What can I get in exchange for each of these? Mr. Brooks's lips curled into a chilling smile. Well, That depends on what you want. Mr. Brooks' withered fingers lightly tapped the bronze scales, causing an eerie glow to ripple across them. Wealth can buy you 3 years of peace, he rasped. Career, 5 years of smooth sailing. As for love, he let out a wheezing laugh. Cut it off, and that woman will instantly lose all affection for him. Naturally, you understand. Each option was like poison wrapped in honey. I remained silent, the air thick enough to choke on. Just then, the door of Kronos' pawn was violently flung open. Justin practically crawled in, his face ashen, cold sweat soaking his collar. Gasping for air, his bloodshot eyes fixed on me like those of a dying beast. Eva! Don't exchange! He roared, his voice broken and desperate. Those are mine, you can't. He even tried to lunge at me, using his last ounce of strength to stop me. But he couldn't even stand steady. Stumbling clumsily onto the cold floor, stirring up a fine dust. He still wanted to control me. Even at this point. All he could think about was his money, his power, his ridiculous possessions. My last shred of patience evaporated. Shut up! I snapped, my voice as cold as ice. Yours? It's my decision now. I turned to Mr. Brooks without hesitation. His wealth, I said. Justin, sprawled on the ground, suddenly looked up, his pupils exploding with utter shock and despair. No! Mr. Brooks grinned, his withered finger making a swift motion. The bronze scales blazed with light. A thick golden stream forcibly extracted from Justin's body and flowing into the scale pan. The weight dropped sharply, producing a dull, thunderous sound. Almost simultaneously, Justin's phone in his pocket began to vibrate frantically. The screen lit up, a flood of incoming calls and text notifications pouring in, the light reflecting off his ashen face. Mr. Hayes! Disaster! The stock has crashed. The bank is suddenly calling in all loans. The audit department has shown up unexpectedly. All projects have been halted. It was over. Everything was over. He collapsed on the ground, as if his spine had been ripped out, not even having the strength to cough. I looked at him coldly, watching this man, whom I had loved for 10 years, who had ultimately treated me like a used tissue, plummet into the abyss in an instant. A cold wind of satisfaction finally blew across the desolate wasteland in my heart. I turned away, not sparing him another glance, and strode out of Kronos' pawn. This time, I didn't go home. That place had ceased to be my home the moment Amy Winslow set foot in it. I checked into a small hotel, turned off my phone, and the world fell utterly silent. A few days later, on a whim, I took a detour past the familiar mansion. From a distance, I could hear the sound of fierce arguing. The windows were open. Amy's shrill voice carried unobstructed, sharp and clear. No trace of her supposedly frail condition. The money's gone. The company's gone. You're nothing but a pauper now. And a sick one at that. How are you going to pay for my treatment? Amy, what's wrong with you? Came Justin's feeble, incredulous response. What's wrong with me? Did you think I was with you to beg on the streets? You useless fool. You can't even hold on to your own money. If I'd known you were this incompetent. I didn't listen to the rest. I just found it a bit laughable. So this was what he had sacrificed everything to save. I turned and left. After a few steps, I suddenly halted. Amy's full-throated shouting just now. How could someone supposedly coughing up blood, to the point of fainting from pulmonary fibrosis, yell so loudly? For the first time, a startling suspicion clearly surfaced in my mind. Was her illness really as severe as they claimed? The cramped room in the small inn had a lingering musty smell that seemed impossible to shake. But I slept deeply. For the first time in years, I didn't wake up in the middle of the night. Didn't hear imaginary coughing, and wasn't tormented by the dull ache in my chest. The news of Justin Hayes' bankruptcy spread like wildfire through the small town. Occasionally, when I went downstairs to buy food, I could hear snippets of gossip. Have you heard? That Mr. Hayes, he lost everything overnight. Serves him right. Must have done too many dodgy deals. What about that sickly mistress of his? Bet she's run off. I walked past, my face expressionless. A few nights later, I heard muffled arguing from downstairs. I pushed open the window, letting in a gust of cold air. In the dim alley below, a thin, hunched figure was practically shoved out. It was Justin. Wearing thin hospital pajamas with a coat haphazardly thrown over them, shivering in the cold. The one pushing him out was Amy Winslow. She was dressed to the nines, carrying a brand new designer handbag. In cruel contrast to Justin's disheveled state. "Get lost! Stop following me!" Amy's voice was sharp and shrill, devoid of her previous fragility. "You make me sick! You penniless, dying wretch, are you trying to drag me down with you?" Justin hunched over, coughing violently, trying to grab her arm. His voice was pleading. "Amy, you can't," you said. "What did I say?" Amy yanked her arm away so forcefully that he stumbled, nearly falling. "I said I liked you when you had money and power. What do you have now?" "Huh? Apart from those bones that are about to fall apart, what do you have?" Her words were like knives, stripping away his last shred of dignity. "No, you said you were trying to save me." Justin gasped for air, each word tasting of blood. "Save you?" Amy's voice rose as if she'd heard the biggest joke, echoing clearly in the quiet night. "If I hadn't thought you had some money then, who'd want to get mixed up with you? If I'd known you'd be so useless, I should have just let you die in that car." Justin stood frozen, as if struck by lightning, even forgetting to cough. Amy seemed to think it wasn't enough. She stepped forward, lowering her voice, but her words were as venomous as ice. "Oh, and I forgot to tell you, the blood I was coughing up was just tomato juice. A fake diagnosis report for pulmonary fibrosis? Easy enough to get with a bit of money. You. Justin's whole body began to shake violently, pointing at her, unable to form a word. "How else could I get you to empty your pockets and your heart, you fool?" Amy let out a scornful laugh, turning without a backward glance towards a black car waiting by the road. The headlights flashed, illuminating Justin's completely shattered, twisted face. He suddenly coughed up a mouthful of blood, falling straight backwards, hitting the cold concrete hard. Like a rag doll drained of all value. Amy didn't even look back as the car sped away. I stood by the window, the cold wind brushing my face. I felt nothing, no sympathy, no satisfaction, just an icy void. The truth was so ugly and ridiculous. For a lie, he had nearly drained me of everything. Downstairs, Justin lay on the ground as if dead, only occasional twitches proving he was still alive. I closed the window, shutting out everything outside. The air seemed to still vibrate with Amy's last words. Fake. It was all fake. So, Justin's so-called life-saving grace. That car accident back then, was it really just an accident? Mr. Brooks, did he know all along? I saw Justin again 3 days later in a cheap rented flat. Mr. Brooks had given me the address. The door wasn't locked. As I pushed it open, a musty odor mixed with the smell of medicine wafted towards me. Justin was curled up in a corner, nestled in a pile of dirty bedding. He had wasted away, his eyes sunken and his skin sallow. Hearing the noise, he struggled to turn his cloudy eyes. When he saw me, a final spark of light burst in his pupils. He tried to crawl towards me on all fours, his throat making a wheezing sound. "Eva." He rasped out my name brokenly, reaching out with a trembling hand like a withered branch. I was wrong. Save me." He admitted his mistake, but it was too late. I stood still, not moving an inch closer, just coldly watching him. "Save you?" I repeated softly, my voice sounding particularly clear in the cramped space. "With what? My remaining lifespan? Or my health?" He seemed stung, coughing violently, curling up into a ball like a pitiful shrimp. "Amy Winslow tricked me, she lied to me. That car accident." He gasped for breath, his eyes widening with fear. "She tampered with my brakes, she wanted me dead. When I didn't die, she put on an act of saving me." The truth was finally laid bare, bloody and ugly. For a woman who had deliberately tried to kill him, and then deceived him when she failed, he had drained his wife's life. How ironic. I listened, but my heart was like a frozen lake, unmoved by even the slightest ripple. "Oh, I responded. Justin was stunned, seemingly not expecting this reaction from me. He looked at me, as if truly seeing for the first time the complete coldness and lifelessness in my eyes. There was no hatred, no resentment, not even a hint of pity. Only emptiness. He collapsed completely, the light in his eyes extinguished, replaced by a gray, defeated despair. He knew he didn't even deserve my hatred anymore. I didn't spare him another glance as I turned to leave. Closing the door, I shut out the nauseating decay inside. At the end of the alley, a black car was parked. Amy Winslow was being roughly dragged out by two tall men. She screamed and struggled, her hair disheveled, her expensive clothes torn, fresh bruises and fear on her face. "Let go of me! Do you know who I am? I have money!" Her shouts stopped abruptly when she saw me. She seemed to understand something, her eyes instantly filled with immense terror. "It's you? Eva Sutton. What have you done?" I didn't speak, just quietly looked at her. One of the men spoke emotionlessly. "Ms. Winslow, you're suspected of fraud and attempted murder. The evidence is conclusive. Also, your new benefactor says the funds you embezzled need to be returned immediately." "It's not like that. It was Justin. It was all voluntary," she cried hysterically, her makeup smeared into an ugly mess. Justin, save me!" She screamed towards the rented flat, but only a violent, dying cough came from inside. No one could save her. The two men mercilessly shoved her into the car. The windows rolled up, cutting off her wails and despair. The car drove away, taking with it a carefully woven nightmare. I took one last look at the tightly closed door of the flat. The coughing inside gradually weakened, finally fading to nothing. The dust had settled. I turned and walked towards the quiet pawnshop deep in the alley. Mr. Brooks was still standing behind the counter. "Is it all over?" he asked hoarsely. "It's over," I said. "Was it worth it?" He looked at me, those all-knowing eyes seeming to hold a different meaning. Using 10 years of marriage to see through a person, exchanging it for a body full of wounds. I was silent for a moment. "It wasn't worth it," I slowly began, "but it's in the past. All those things I had been pawned could never be reclaimed. The pain was real, the harm was deep. But that was all. I wouldn't dwell on it." Mr. Brooks seemed to smile. "Now, what do you want to pawn? Or redeem?" He threw out the final temptation. I looked at the bronze scales that had determined the course of my fate, and shook my head. No need. I had pawned my love, my kindness, my 10 years of youth, in exchange for a bloody growth. I didn't need to redeem the past. Nor did I need to pawn the future. I turned and walked out of the pawnshop, never looking back. Outside the alley, the sky was beginning to brighten. The morning wind carried a chill. But it also dispersed the gloom and the stench of decay. My body was still weak, and the road ahead uncertain. But my steps had never been so light. The shackles had fallen away. I had, with my own hands, opened the cage door for myself.